when we look down below here, I want to point out right here, this box, there's not a spot in Apply that you can actually write anything in. But when we get to pieces of paper where you need to write it in, a lot of times students start writing on the first line, but it doesn't make sense to write on this first line because there's nothing right here that you can actually put here for numbers. So we're going to put right here on the left-hand side is going to be account headings and account names. And then you will notice that there are two columns here. The two columns on your income statement do not relate to debit and credit. There's a left column and a right column. At the very bottom of this income statement, you are not making debits and credits equal. The whole purpose of an income statement is to determine if we made money or lost money. Now, they gave us in our directions already the partial portion of a worksheet. And on a worksheet, we determined the net income already. So we know if our income statement comes out correctly, if it equals the net income on our worksheet. So we'll see we have a left column is going to be where we put individual numbers, and the right column is going to be where we would put totals. And then we have this whole fancy column here on the right-hand side called percent of sales. If you recall when you worked on your group work at the beginning of the semester, pretty much percent of sales column is going to be a way for our business to be able to compare to other businesses. So let's say, for example, my business is Packer Pizza and Sub in town. And I want to see how well I'm doing compared to Pizza Hut. Right? We sell similar things. Would you agree? Would it be easy to compare my income statement to theirs? Theirs is going to have much bigger numbers. Would you agree? Because they're a franchise and they're all throughout the United States. So what we do, instead of comparing and looking at the numbers, we look at the percent of sales column to see how close we are. Because it doesn't matter if they're in the billions and we're in the hundreds of thousands. When you look at percent of sales, it makes it all equal. So we'll always be able to go through and put in here for a percent of sales column. We always divide by sales. So that's going to be our heads up. So this is one of the first times we'll have to do a little bit of division. So when we look at our directions, we're completing an income statement for Darlene's Delivery Service. They did give us a partial income worksheet. And we're completing this for the end of the month of July 31st of the current year. So let's put in the name of our business, which is Darlene's Delivery Service. It's an income statement, and we're doing for month ended July 31st, 20XX. Now, two account classifications go on our income statement, revenue and expenses. Those need to be headings on our income statement. So on this very first line right here, I'm going to type in revenue, followed by a colon. No numbers go with it. This is just a heading to say, hey, what's below here is my revenue. Mm-hmm.
Isn't it for month ended?
Oh, it should be for month ended, yes. Bing, bing, bing. Good eyes today on a Monday morning. Thank you. I would have got that one marked wrong. How many revenue accounts do we have, Sarah?
One.
And what is that account called?
Sales.
Yes. So right below revenue, I'm going to type in the word sales. Now, please remember on our income statement, this is not debit, this is not credit. This is individual, this is totals. Sarah just told me we only have one revenue account. So my number for revenue is going to be a total, so it's got to go on the right column. So I'm going to grab from my worksheet my revenue amount of $5,511, and I'm going to put it on the right-hand side. If I have two revenue accounts, which you will have an example of in this chapter, I would say sales office, sales store, whatever my sales accounts are, they would be both listed on the left-hand side, and then I would have total revenue over here on the right. And there is a visual example of what that looks like in your chapter as well. But again, remember, totals go on the right, individual amounts go on the left. So I'm done with my first section because, again, income statements is always revenue minus expenses. So I need to go right below my sales account. I'm going to put in the heading of expenses, followed by a colon. Jaden, how many expense accounts do we have? 2. We have advertising expense all the way through supplies expense. Now, what I want to point out, when we look at the partial worksheet that they gave us, notice the columns that they gave us. They gave us the income statement columns. Do not get the numbers from trial balance, because eventually you're going to be going through and working on creating an income statement from a whole worksheet, but you always want to get your income statement numbers from the income statement column. So you'll go through and list your individual accounts starting with advertising expense. And then the amount is going to go on the left-hand side because I have to get a total for my expenses. So I have my 4 expenses listed here, advertising through supplies. You will notice when I put in my amount for supplies, the $713, Applia automatically put a single line underneath there. What we need to realize in accounting is when we see a single line, that indicates that we've done math, or we're going to be doing some type of math. Do you remember back in 1st and 2nd grade when you were first learning how to add and subtract? You would write 1 and then you'd do plus 1 and then you draw a line underneath it to show that that's going to be where your total goes. The same thing is going to hold true here in accounting. You can see when Applia automatically gives you a line here, it's telling you, hey, we have to do some math. They already did fill in right here my next heading, which is total expenses. And again, remember totals go on the right-hand column. So I'm going to add up 821, 300, 347, 713. And it's going to go down below here on the right-hand side for total expenses. So go ahead and add that up. Dylan, what did you get?
2,181.
Anyone agree with him? All right, I like that. Okay, so now when I look at this right column, I have my total revenue, I have my total expenses. My revenue number is 5,000, my expense number is 2,000. My revenue is greater than my expenses, so therefore it must be a net income, which they already had filled in for us. Also, when you look at your worksheet, on the very bottom of the worksheet, it does already say net income as well. So how do I calculate my net income? Revenue minus expenses to give me my net income. Did anyone calculate that number yet?
3,230.
3,330. Anyone want to agree with Brandon's number? Kayla's nodding her head. She likes that one. Now, how do I know if that number's right? Because in accounting, we always have a way of checking to know. It's on the worksheet. Do you see it on the worksheet where your net income is? If you went through and calculated and you didn't get that number, that means either your worksheet's wrong or either your income statement's wrong. So that's your way of double checking to make sure everything is good to go. We are very close to finishing up here. The next thing that we have to do is we have to go through and calculate and record our component percentages for total expenses and net income. It tells us that right in instruction number 1. And it does tell us to round the percentage calculations to the nearest 0.1%. So how do we do that? I'm going to go through and take sales and divide by sales. So if I take 5,511 and divide by 5,511, what is it going to give me? 100%, because we always have to change it to percent. So I will tell you, right now you can remember on your test, this number will always be 100.0. We always got to have one decimal place. Now, we have to do it 2 more times. I need to do it right here for total expenses. So in your calculator, you're going to take $2,181 and divide by 5,511. Now, when I did that in my calculator, I got 0.395753946. Would you agree? Did you get that number as well? Now, I need to round that or change that to a percentage. So to change that to the percentage, I move my decimal places 2 to the right. So I should have 39.6 because you have to round it correctly. What does that number mean? Okay, for every dollar that Darlene's delivery service brings in, 39.6 cents goes to expenses. That's pretty much what we're taking a look at. Instead of looking at it in thousands or in hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, this puts it in a way that's easy for us to understand. So some businesses, when you look at it, their percent of sales number might be very high, meaning for every dollar they bring in, they have to spend a lot of it to cover some expenses. So we need to do exactly the same thing, but one more time for net income. So I'm going to put in my calculator 3,330, divide by 5,511. So you always start with the number that you're searching for, and then put in your sales number. When I did that, I got 0.604246053. Move that decimal places 2 to the right, and then I would have 60.4. Always remember one decimal place, even if it's going to be a 0, and make sure you round correctly. So what does this mean? For every dollar we bring in, 60.4 cents of it is profit for our business. Now, different businesses are going to have different acceptable component percentages. Some businesses, there are just more expenses that go into what is produced. So, for example, when I look at a restaurant has very high expenses that have to go into covering the cost of operating, because they have the food and they have the wait staff and they have all of the supplies. Other businesses don't have as much expenses that relate back into it. So that is how you complete an income statement. Go ahead and try on your own.